You know what we gotta do? Toga party.
We're on double secret probation, whatever that is. We can't afford to have a toga party.
You guys up for a toga party?
Toga! Toga!
Yeah, I think they like the idea, Hoove.
Oh, Otter, please don't do this.
I got news for you, pal. They're gonna nail us no matter what we do. So we might as well have a good time.
Toga, 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 toga.
Director John Landis today on Pop Goes the Culture. Hi, I'm David Levin, and welcome to another bountiful episode of Pop Goes the Culture. Today, the second part of my interview with iconic film director John Landis. In this episode, John Landis talks more about Animal House, why he did want John Belushi, but didn't want Chevy Chase. Plus, he lunches with Hitchcock, an American Werewolf in London, and what it was like working with Michael Jackson to create the legendary Thriller. I should tell you in advance, this interview was shot a while ago while Jackson was still alive. Take a look.
So, John Belushi, you'd worked with him before?
No, I never. No, in fact, again, Harold Ramis, Doug Kenny, and Chris Miller from the Lampoon and Second City, Harold's from Second City, they all knew John Belushi and Chevy Chase and Danny Aykroyd and Gilda Radner. They knew these people before Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live had just started, where Lorne Michaels was smart enough to cherry pick this extraordinary first cast that's never been equaled. From basically Chicago and Toronto. And when the script was written, they wrote the part of Bluto for John Belushi. They wrote the part of Otter for Chevy Chase. They wrote the part of D-Day for Dan Aykroyd. So I was trying to get those guys. At that time, after the first year of Saturday Night Live, which was a cult, it was not a big commercial success, but it was a very chic and hip show. They were all being courted, especially Chevy. He was the star because he was the good-looking one, and it was, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. And so the studio basically said, if you don't get a movie star, we won't make your movie. And I had to get at least John Belushi. So I went to meet John in New York, and we got on famously, and he was a wonderful person. I tried desperately to get Danny to be D-Day, and Lorne Michaels wouldn't release him from the show.
He wanted to do it?
Oh, sure. But Lorne was scared that he was losing everybody to the movies. Well, it's legit, because he did.
And he was smart enough to later produce those movies.
Well, now he's, now when you go on Saturday Night Live, he owns you. He owns you for years. It's like the plantation. So John agreed to do it. Mostly because of Kentucky Fried Movie, he loved Fistful of Yen. He had a passion for martial arts and Japanese films. Obviously he did Mifune. But I couldn't get anyone else. And Chevy, actually, that's a funny story. Chevy was incredibly hot. And the studio said, if you get Chevy Chase, it's a go. But Chevy was being courted by everyone. And we had a lunch. I'll never forget it, because it's me and Ivan and Chevy's 4 managers, agents, yes men. And Chevy smoking a big cigar, and we were having this lunch. And I did not want Chevy. Not because I made 2 movies with Chevy, Three Amigos and Spies Like Us. I quite liked Chevy, but I didn't want him for Animal House because he was too well known as Chevy Chase. And I wanted Eric Stratton. It was just my own naivete. I thought, I could get unknowns. I pretty much pulled it off, but 90% of the cast is their first movie.
And later on went on, most of them went on.
Oh, Tom, I'm 1 degree of separation from, I gave Kevin Bacon his first job, but Kevin Bacon, Karen Allen, Peter Riegert, Stephen Furst, Peter, I'm leaving so many people out. It was their first jobs.
Tim Matheson? Was that his first?
No, Tim Matheson was a child actor. He was on Leave It to Beaver. Tim Matheson. He's in, ever see a movie called Yours, Mine, and Ours?
Yeah, oh right, he was in that.
Tim Matheson, yeah. No, he was like the old pro, Tim. No, the casting of Animal House, the studio, my ideas were unorthodox. It's something that, in fact, the Zucker-Abrams guys did with great success, which is that I really feel that you cast the best actor, whether it's a comic or not. You cast the best person for the part. You try to make it real. And so I was trying to get the best actors. Bruce McGill is another one I gave his first movie in that, and just so many fine actors. But my original choice for Dean Wormer was Jack Webb, and I had a hysterical lunch with Jack Webb where he just smoked and drank scotch and looked at me like I was certifiable. He just couldn't get it, and I wanted Kim Novak for Mrs. Wormer, and Ned Tannen, literally was like, shake his head like. So I'm hiring these great, Tom Hulse from Equus on Broadway, and Karen Allen. Karen Allen just walked in, and she was like so delicious. I said, her, that face, you. Bruce McGill from Shakespeare in the Park, Mark Metcalf from Streamers on Broadway. I mean, I was just getting this really distinguished cast. And then I saw The Outlaw Josie Wales, Clint Eastwood movie. It's one where Clint fired Phil Kaufman and he took it over. It's a wonderful movie. And John Vernon, with those blue eyes and that black beard, is sort of a good bad guy in it. He has a great line in that movie. He says, "Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining." And when I saw him with that voice, I said, my God, that's, the time has come for someone to put their foot down, and that foot is me. That kind of Doug Kenny dialogue. I said, man, I want him. So I offered it to John Vernon, who was so delighted. And he read the script, and he couldn't believe it. And what's funny is, not to the same level, but it's like what happened to Leslie Nielsen. I mean, here are two guys who spent entire lifetime careers playing the captain, the bad guy, the lieutenant, all these, and suddenly they're huge comic stars. But it was just using them correctly. I mean, in Airplane, I think that Lloyd Bridges and Robert Stack, the best, one of the best comedy scenes, is Peter Graves saying, "You ever seen a grown man naked? Do you like gladiator movies? That stuff is great." So anyway, I wanted actors. They go more for personalities, but I wanted actors. And so I saw, there's a wonderful actress, Verna Bloom, from The Hired Hand, so many movies, and from, Haskell Wexler's, what's that great movie about the '69 Chicago Convention?
Oh.
Robert Forster, Verna Bloom, Haskell Wexler. I'm so embarrassed I can't think of the name. Anyway, Verna Bloom's a great actress, and I got her from Mrs. Wormer. It was very unorthodox, They were thinking of like Dom DeLuise, who I adore, but they were thinking of like Dom DeLuise for the dean, and I hire Cesare DeNova. They think I'm nuts. So my lunch with Chevy was, if you don't get Chevy, you don't get the movie. But I didn't want Chevy. Ivan, of course, wanted to get the movie made, so he's desperate to get Chevy. So he's, fawning all over Chevy, and Chevy was offered this movie that became a big hit for him opposite the very young and hot Goldie Hawn, called Foul Play, Colin Higgins, which was a big hit movie. And at the time, I remember just saying at lunch, I said, Chevy, if you do Foul Play, that's like Cary Grant. That's like, David Niven, Ronald Colman. That's like, a Clark Gable kind of, Gary Cooper kind of, that's like a leading man. That's the kind of thing where you'd be like, it's like a romantic comedy. It's all about attractiveness and charm and stuff. But if you do Animal House, it's an ensemble, like Saturday Night Live. And Ivan's kicking me under the table. So I was so bruised. Anyway, so Chevy Anyway, he chose correctly. He made a big hit movie. And I got Tim Matheson, and they were like, Tim had just come off of a TV series called The Quest with Kurt Russell, which was a failed Western. And they were like looking at me, who did you hire? So I really was fucked. I mean, basically, I had this wonderful cast, and they wouldn't give me a green light. And they just said, you have to get a movie star. And I thought, who do I know who's a movie star? Well, at that time, Donald Sutherland, who's now the distinguished, statesman of the stage and screen, then was young, wild Donald Sutherland, and he was a big star. And I called Donald. And see, I knew Donald from when I was a mail boy from MASH, and then I worked on Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia. So, I knew Don, and I called him up, and I said, please be in the movie. Please. He said, well, what do I play? I said, I don't know. We'll make something up. Just be in the movie. And so we made up the character of Jennings. So Don did a day and a half's work. Great. And that's how we got a green light. Because Donald Sutherland got that movie made, because he was the big star. Wow. For which I'm eternally grateful. And he was also brilliant in it. So anyway, so Animal House, we made it. I did not expect it to become, no one expected it. I mean, really no. You know who expected it? John Vernon.
Really?
He kept saying, you don't understand. We're making a great film here. We're going, yeah, right, John.
But it's iconic. I mean, it wasn't just a hit. Here we are, what are we, almost 30 years later, and it's a watershed.
It's an interesting film because it captured the zeitgeist, but also what makes Animal House so successful, I think, with 2020 hindsight, is there's a moment in men's lives, and girls' lives, and people's lives, but especially in men, where you are either in the military or in school. And people recall their either high school or especially their college days. Or their, it's amazing how people talk about their military experience too. It's the best years of their lives, to use that cliche. And they remember this with such heartfelt emotion. And I realized, well, what do these things have in common? Well, you're 18 and 19. And it's the first time you're out of the house. So you're functioning as an adult, but you're not even close to being an adult. So, there's a line in Animal House. I'm not sure it made the finished movie, but there was I'm not sure it's in the movie, but there was a line of Tim's where he says, we can do anything we want. We're college students. And it's just that sense of euphoria, of freedom and experimentation. And I think the movie somehow captures that. I think it really captures that. And I can't tell you, I mean, now it's been, almost 30 years. People come up to me, people in their 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, who say, that was my fraternity. I knew that guy. So the writers really captured something.
Having been in college when that movie came out, I can't even begin to tell you the change on campus pre-Animal House and post-Animal House.
One of the strange things of Animal House that the Greek system, because of the 60s, was dying. The Greek system was in serious trouble in the 70s, and we made Animal House, and it brought it back, and now it's more powerful than ever. I'm not sure I'm happy with that. For me, the problem with fraternities is the exclusive nature of a fraternity. I mean, basically excluding other people. And so that's why the deltas include everyone. We really thought the requirement for membership in the deltas was the desire to join. Because it's the omegas that got all the baggage, the bad frat stuff I don't like.
And oddly enough, all the new fraternities, the big bold, they all copied the omegas. All the new fraternities.
Well, no, they were always the omegas. And stranger still is that they think they're the deltas. I've had so many Republican politicians who tell me, that was my frat, but it wasn't, No, that's how they think of themselves, but they were the omegas.
One of the great things about the movies that you do is that you always or frequently call back to certain things. Ask for Babs, See You Next Wednesday, Niedermeyer in Twilight Zone. And it's just like, could you sort of talk about, because I think that's great. It's almost like Stephen King does a similar thing with
Well, no, it's an alternate reality. I mean, there's this movie reality, and then there's reality, and then that's not important. That's just me.
It's kind of fun though. It's like your little stamp. You're making your Alfred Hitchcock little.
No, I don't make me Hitchcock. Don't compare me to Hitchcock. That guy was a genius. I was very privileged. I used to have lunch with Hitchcock at Universal because we both had bungalows on the lot. My bungalow, where I was 23 years on that lot, was torn down to build Jurassic Park: The Ride. So. Needless to say, I'm not on the lot anymore. Those raptors,
Urban development.
But Hitchcock used to be on the lot. I used to go. I had lunch with him. I'd say 20, 25 times over the 3 years that I knew him, and that was quite a privilege. He was an amazing character.
Let's talk a little bit about American Werewolf, which obviously you wrote it when you were 19. So
I was on a movie in Yugoslavia called Kelly's Heroes in the former Yugoslavia, and I was a flunky. They were called gophers then. Now they're called production assistants. A schlepper is what they are. And I was 18. I turned 19. 1969, which was this extraordinary year in history. I was behind the Iron Curtain with Telly Savalas and Clint Eastwood, Don Rickles. You know, it was an amazing movie directed by Brian Hutton. Very extraordinary time, 9 months. Tito was alive, so it was communism with the, hammer and sickle. And it's hard for people now to envision the Cold War, but it was, you literally went from, behind the Iron Curtain, you went from color to black and white. You went from, 1969 to World War II. I mean, it hadn't been rebuilt there. It was quite something. And we're playing Nazi, and blowing things up. And it was a great experience for me. I remember my first day on the set of the first unit. Telly Savalas, was a big star then, comes over to me and says, "Kid," and I go, "Yes, sir." And he had a cup of coffee. He says, "Would you hold this for me?" It was a paper cup. And I went, "Yes, sir." And I must have held on to that damn cup at least 30 minutes before I realized he was just getting rid of it. And I was like, "John, I'm sorry, I'm holding Mr. Savalas' coffee." Well, where is Mr. Savalas? He's back at the hotel. It was just, I just remember that so well. Will you hold this for me? Yes, sir. But that was a great experience. Why am I telling you about? Oh, because I witnessed this freak burial. I've told this story so many times now. These people have heard it before. But I was being driven from Novi Sad to Umag. And in Yugoslavia then, I think in the entire country, there were 30 cars. And at least 10 of them were in a car accident. And we were driving down this road. I had my interpreter guy was named Sasha, who was a very well-educated guy. He spoke 9 languages, very sophisticated. And we come to a traffic jam. Like, what's going on? There was like a donkey cart in front of us or something. And it was a burial. It was in the crossroads, the crux of a crossroads. And it was very interesting. They dug a hole straight deep. They were burying this man feet first. His corpse was wrapped with canvas, and then the canvas was wrapped with garlands of garlic and rosaries. It really was like the back lot of Universal Pictures, because a Greek Orthodox priest and all these gypsies. And the gypsies were complete dress extras, with the babushkas. They looked, I'd been on the back lot a lot, so I'm going, hey, I'm familiar with this. And they bury the guy, and I thought, I've never, what? A lot of incense, and I said, what's going on? And Sasha said, he went and talked to them, and he came back giggling. And essentially, this guy had committed some sort of violent crime. He was a bad guy, and he was killed. And they were burying him this way to prevent mischief, so that his body wouldn't get up and cause trouble. And Sasha thought it was a riot, and I was amazed. But that got me thinking, because I really started thinking of the supernatural. I was thinking, well, how does someone who is rational and fairly worldly deal with the undead? Or, something like that. And then I realized, it got into a whole thing for me, because I realized, there are people who, are not idiots, and they believe in the virgin birth. Just really bizarro stuff that everyone makes fun of the Muslims now, but the fundamentalists, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, they're all nuts. And I just thought, well, how do you deal with it if it's real, So I wrote an American Werewolf in London. I wrote a couple of scripts there when I was there. And so that's 69. So I brought it back. I was back in the States in 71 because I went to Spain. And I came back, and I tried to get it made. And I wrote it in 69. I made it in 81. So,
Took a little while.
Yeah. And the only reason I got to make it was because Kentucky Fried Animal House and the Blues Brothers had made so much money that they go, okay, here's $10 million, go make your movie. It was literally like that.
But you'd worked with Rick Baker before.
Well, Rick Baker I met on Schlock. Absolutely. He's won 8 Oscars now or something. I'd given Rick the script in 1971. Said, figure this out,
You had 10 years to figure it out.
Yeah. It was an unusual script because, well, like the movie, it's very, very funny, but it's not a comedy. I resent it when people call it a comedy because it's a balls-out horror picture, ends in tragedy. 2 boys show up in a truckload of sheep. It's not subtle. My wife says I put the B in subtle. And it's just, the movie is very, very close to the movie I wrote when I was 18. And I think part of the success of that movie is the relationship of the 2 boys is very much me and friends when we were that age. And the dialogue really is true to that. Some of it makes me cringe. But when I got to make it years later, I at that time had some clout, and I was able to get, again, I wanted unknowns for the two leads, and I got Griffin Dunn, David Naughton. David Naughton I saw in a Dr. Pepper commercial, and I thought his personality was so winning. I had him come in and read, and he was terrific. And Griffin, both of them I had to hire 6 months before production. Before I had a deal, I had to hire them, commit my money to them, because Rick Baker needed to make molds so that he could sculpt and create everything. So anyway, that was a very good experience. George Folsey, my partner, produced it. We went to London. It's a British picture. It's British, British film. And it was an excellent experience because I had Jenny Agutter, a wonderful actress, and because I'd made the Blues Brothers, I was allowed access in London that had been denied a lot of people before. There's a filmmaker named Michael Winner who in the 60s made a movie called The Jokers with Michael Crawford and Oliver Reed and Orson Welles. And in it, he had a smoke bomb in a taxi go off in Piccadilly Circus. This is the height of the IRA bombings in London, and it caused big trouble. So the Metropolitan Police in Scotland Yard said, fuck off, that was it. There was no filming for quite a while in Metropolitan London. So when I got there, the script was pretty ambitious in its use of the city. We're in Trafalgar Square and Leicester Square and Piccadilly Circus, and gosh, we're in the zoo. We're all over the place, Tottenham Court Tube Station, and we're all over town. And people would read it and go, well, you can't shoot this. And what was fascinating at that time, that's not so long ago, 1981, there was no film office or permit office. It was down to the local Bobby on the beat. So if the cop said piss off, that was it. You were done. So it's a lot of feeding of policemen. Here, have another cup of tea and the scone, But because the Chicago police, we did such extraordinary things in Chicago in terms of traffic control and all that stuff with the chases, they helped me tremendously. The Chicago cops spoke to the London cops, and that's how I was able to pull that off.
Great.
Yeah. And so that was a great experience, Werewolf, because I was signing the checks. I didn't have to answer to anybody, so that was a great experience.
That's so great. And that led to Mr. Jackson's video.
Directly to Thriller, because Michael Jackson saw An American Werewolf in London and was he's obviously fascinated by change and metamorphosis. And at that time, Mike, it's hard to explain what a big star Michael was. But Mike was so incandescent, like the Beatles or Sinatra or Elvis. Very few people get that kind of fame during their lifetime. And being with Michael when we made Thriller was like being with Jesus.
At the height of his career. I mean, that
oh, yeah. And like he used to get phone calls from people like, Michael, Lillian Disney's calling. Elizabeth Taylor, Fred Astaire, just Gene Kelly. Just incredible people would call Michael all the time. It was amazing. The Reagans would stop by the set. I would avoid them. I would go, tell me when they're off the set. But it was amazing. I mean, he just, he knew everyone. I met Spanky McFarlane, through Michael Jackson. I mean, it was amazing. And people would see him. It's like the Beatles or Elvis or Sinatra, I think, where people would see Michael literally burst into tears or faint or have an orgasm. You saw that a lot. You saw women and men just overcome and that religious ecstasy that's coming. I mean, basically, it's an orgasm. You saw them. And it was like, this is so weird. And Mike, because he, from the time of 8, had been performing, he's doing 4, 5, 6 shows a day at the Apollo. He was on the road performing. It didn't faze him. I mean, no matter how frantic it got, he was like, hello, hi. The only time I feared for my life, really feared for my life, was with Michael. We went to Disney World after I'd made Thriller. We took my baby daughter, Rachel, who's now 24, and my wife, Deborah, and we went to Disney World, in Florida for the first time. And so I have this photograph of Mike and me and Mickey Mouse by the castle. And to do it, we had like the Disney photographer, and we were on a lawn, not much bigger than this stage space. And they had that thin, the stanchions with the little rope, like in a bank, to protect us. And we sort of got there, and there was the Disney cop, those Disney Secret Service guys, and the two of us. And then Mickey came up. They never speak. They're not allowed to speak, and it's so funny because they're like, and so you don't know if it's a boy or a girl or a midget or a man or a child. You don't know what's in that thing. Anyway, it's that face. So Michael and I are about to have our picture taken, and the word got out, Michael Jackson is there. Within what seemed like seconds, there were literally thousands, and there were, in my mind, millions. Later, they told me there were at least 3,000, and I said, it's got to be more than 3,000, because we were surrounded by people as far as you could see, dense crowd, screaming and taking pictures, and I'm thinking, Day of the Locust, they're going to eat us. And the cop is freaking out and calling for help, and it's getting more, it was all very quick, but it was terrifying. And I thought, we're going to drown in a sea of humanity, and, they're going to eat us. Look at these people, like, screaming and yelling. And Mickey, he's got this big smile, but inside he's going, Jesus Christ, oh my God, And it was incredible. And from nowhere, and I mean nowhere, I still don't know from where, this Cadillac limousine appears, and these guys throw us into the limo. Me, Mike, and Mickey, that big head through the door, and we're all in the back seats, like that, in the back. And then the crowd broke, and it was like surf. It broke over the car, climbed all over the car, and their faces pressed on the window, and people screaming. Mickey and I scared shitless. Michael is like, hi, hello, hi. Didn't bother him. I was terrified. That was one of the scariest things that ever happened to me. Yeah, so, when you go through that kind of celebrity, I think it's very difficult to remain sane.
Oh, God. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
That's it for today. Next time, more Michael Jackson stories. Fred Astaire, Thriller, The Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd, Paul Schaefer, and Three Amigos. See you then. I'm David Levin. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. Just push a button. Ouch! Oh.